Hey guys, Eddie here from Dilleen Property. Today I want to do a quick video. This video was actually requested by, I forget the person's name, apologies, but they someone sent a email through to the admin team here at Dilleen Property, and they basically had the question, or they wanted us to do a video basically about going through a disclosure statement. When you buy a property in a complex that has like a body corporate or strata, some people call it, whether it's a townhouse or a unit, how to properly look at a disclosure statement and what are some things to look for in a disclosure statement. So as always, I'm going to try to jump straight to the chase, and I've got a disclosure statement here that this is for a property that we bought for a client. So for confidentiality purposes, the addresses and the names are blacked out, but this is the basic layout of a disclosure statement. So I'm basically going to try to summarize stuff as much as possible. There's a lot of other stuff to look for, bear in mind, and different states are different. Like this is for a property located in Brisbane, about 20 minutes out of Brisbane. So disclosure statements for townhouse complexes and unit complexes could be different in different states. So this is for Brisbane, so bear in mind that. So we'll go through it. The first page, basically, this is the first page. You can see the body corporate, the body corporate manager, or the actual place is called Whittles. I've actually got a couple properties that are managed by Whittles, they call it. I believe I'm pronouncing it properly. But the first page of a disclosure statement is basically, it just has the basic information, so there's nothing really in depth on here. But this is the disclosure statement, so it's got like the secretary of the body corporate, the body corporate manager. It's just basically got their details, the body corporate committee, if there's a committee been appointed, and that's basically usually like a group of people who act on behalf of the complex. So if there's, say, 50 townhouses or 50 units in a complex, or even 5 or 10, a committee can be appointed generally by all, everyone votes, and it would be like a committee of, say, 3 to 5 people who are in charge and can vote on behalf of stuff such as getting new things fixed around if it's a townhouse complex. Some common things I've seen is after 15, 20, 30 years, everyone will vote and they'll use money within the sinking fund to do new fences around the complex and that kind of stuff. So yeah, they've just, the first page summarizing, it's just got the secretary, body corporate manager and committee if there is one. We'll jump to the second page. The second page we've got here is pretty much the most important page generally, and sometimes they have different layouts, but one of the main things I'll always be looking at is the levies. So the levies for the body corporate, for the strata, if it's a townhouse, a unit, or whatever it is, how much are the levies per quarter, per year, per 6 months? Some structure it differently. Some structure it the payments are due every quarter. Other places do it every 6 months, and wherever. Most of them, usually they come out every quarter. So in terms of a levy, like the strata fees or the body corporate fees, they are generally broken up into 2 components. So 2 components. I'm not sure if you can see there, but there's the admin component and then the sinking fund component. So the admin component is generally what's involved in that is that's basically the fees for the body corporate manager to look after it, do all the admin work and that kind of stuff. Also generally includes things like your building insurances. So for a townhouse complex or a unit complex, generally 90% of the time or 99% of the time, you just have to check the fine print, your building insurances are included in the administrative fund most of the time. So pretty much that's responsible for things like maintenance, ingoings, outgoings, expenditure, public liability and that kind of stuff. So your insurances, your different kind of insurances such as flood, fire, catastrophe, public liability, structural integrity of the building itself is usually covered under the administrative fund. So this is just most of the time, not all the time. The other component is number 2, is the sinking fund, right? So the sinking fund, it has a funny name, and even I didn't know what it was at first, but the sinking, what that is basically is a big piggy bank. I try to explain it to clients as a piggy bank for the complex unit or townhouse complex, and money just accumulates, right? It just accumulates over time, and over time they can withdraw money depending on the committee and people who vote for it. Usually they have annual meetings every 12 months, sometimes is a minimum of 6 months. But I've had I bought a couple units in the Gold Coast as an example, and they had to vote because they're it's on a second story and the balconies had to be replaced. Everyone had to vote. The body corporate was in charge of getting quotes and that kind of stuff, and then everyone voted for that kind of thing to get it fixed. So, but that money was withdrawn from the sinking fund. So basically, a sinking fund, it's a big piggy bank where money just accumulates. So that's what the sinking fund. So it's broken down into 2 components. So this one, as an example, is the administrative fund per quarter. Not sure if you can see that. Is $652 roughly a quarter is the administrative fund, and the sinking fund is about $100 a quarter. So that equals out to be about $725 per quarter for the strata or body corporate, $725 a quarter, which is roughly around $2,800 per year, roughly, or just under $3,000 per year, which is probably average in my opinion. But there's so many different circumstances and variables as well. This complex that the client bought in, as an example, had a pool, had security gated. It was a very nice complex that had barbecue area, all that kind of stuff. So I've seen body corporate or fees as low as $900 a year, $1,200 a year. This one's about $2,800 a year, or $3,000 a year roughly. Another thing to look out for, sometimes the body corporate or the strata, the levies, you get discounts sometimes depending on the structure of it if you pay on time. This one's a good example. So you see $625 roughly, the due date, and then you actually get a 10% discount if you paid on time. So roughly $2,800, and same with the sinking fund, you get a discount if you paid on time, 10% discount. So this one's technically about $2,800 roughly, but it really drops down to about $2,500 if you paid on time, roughly. So that's the main things to look out for, the administrative fund and the sinking fund levy. Something to know for the future, the sinking fund levy can change depending on how much is in the sinking fund. Sometimes they can raise what's called a special levy if things need to be done throughout the complex, and if there's not enough money to pay for it within the sinking fund. If everyone votes for it, and most owners, they're not saying most owners are tight asses, but most owners, they try to go for the cheapest thing, or the most beneficial thing financially for everyone who lives in there. So usually they'll go with the best quote that's bang for buck and all that kind of stuff. So that's something to look out for. Just some other things that will be listed, like improvements of common property, body corporate assets required, lot entitlements. So yeah, there's a lot of other things to look out for, but I'm just running you through the basics and the most important stuff that I look for. One of the other pages which you will find on a body corporate notice is the insurances. So this one, as an example, has a list of all the different insurances. So some of these are legal liability, office bearer liability. One is catastrophe, flood, cover, machinery breakdown, fidelity guarantees, government audit costs and all that kind of stuff. Lot owners, fixtures and fittings and all that kind of thing. So this basically, you can see who this one's insured by. This is the underwriter is Allianz, which has those funny commercials. And and it's done, the broker is MGA Insurance Brokers. So the insurance is covered by the body corporate. Here's all the information. So for this townhouse in particular that the client bought, this one was an absolute bargain anyway. They bought it, we found it for them off market. They bought it in Brisbane. It was about $186,000. Rented out $310 a week. Below market value, growth potential, metro area, high rental yield. Is an unbelievable buy. So here's all the insurances. I strongly recommend just checking out the insurances and all that other kind of stuff. But generally, the body corporate, most of them have their head screwed on right, and they have the right insurances in place. It's their legal job to make sure the complexes is fully insured for the structural integrity and the outer components of most of the properties. So with townhouses like this one, the owner didn't need to get building insurance because it's already incorporated in the strata or body corporate. So only thing most of the time a person needs, and this is not financial advice, this is just from my experience, always check all that stuff, yada yada. The only thing the person needed was landlord insurance, and that's cheap as chips. It's like $300 for the entire year. So insurance is a thing to look out for, basically. There's a place on the disclosure statement where you need to sign, just to say that you've basically got all the information. There's other things. These disclosure statements can be 50 pages long. Sometimes they're as little as 4 or 5 pages. Sometimes they're 50 pages, depending on a lot of different factors. This one has an asset register. So an asset, I won't show you exactly what's on it and all that kind of stuff, but an asset register is basically things that the body corporate is within this townhouse complex. So this one has a pool, so you can see on there, it's also got a barbecue. It's got everything listed with how much the market value is of that. For this, when I go through this stuff nowadays, I don't even really care about it. The only main thing I look at is the sinking fund balance, the administrative fund, like the levies and that kind of stuff. So just trying to find the sinking fund balance. Here we go. So we've missed the page, but underneath the actual levies, we've missed it. This was the sinking fund balance. So it says balance of the sinking fund, and it says roughly $80,000 is in the sinking fund as of the 13th of May 2019. So for this particular complex, there was a townhouse. There was about probably 40 rough townhouses in there, right? And the balance of the sinking fund is roughly $80,000. And this is all from the seller's perspective, they have to order this. This document costs, $100 to $200 for the seller to order this. It is their legal obligation to give you a copy of the disclosure statement when you buy a property that's a townhouse or unit. And this stuff must be correct. So the sinking fund, from my experience, that's a pretty average to okay balance of sinking fund. You've got to look at other things like if there's any planned maintenance or anything like that, and generally you'll know most of the time by doing a pest and building report, all that other kind of stuff, which is separate. But $80,000 by rule of thumb, if there's a minimum 1,000 to 2,000 in a sinking fund per lot, then that is, from my experience, it's okay. So right now there's about 40 townhouses in there, and there's 80,000 in the sinking fund. So there's about 2K buffer per lot. And sometimes the bigger it is, the lower the margin can be, the smaller it is. If there's a block of 5, well then you might want to have 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 per lot in there or whatever. But it's good to keep an eye on that. If the sinking fund has 0 in there, that is something that can cause dramas potentially, or in most cases, where they'll have to raise a special levy to increase the sinking fund to make sure there is enough in there, especially if there's like big structural issues and all that kind of stuff, which I've bought properties with structural issues. It's a filthy word, but yeah, it just depends on the scenario. Sinking fund, very important. Always make sure you know what the sinking fund is, the admin fund, the sinking fund levies and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff to, like in this actual disclosure statement, there's other stuff such as asset registers, just schedule the different lot entitlements and that kind of stuff. Just the different lots in there. And I think another thing I guess you can do is really, you can also request minutes of meetings before you go to buy a property, if need be. You can look at all that other kind of stuff as well. So that's a little bit about a disclosure statement, admin fund, sinking fund balance, the levies, and look at if there has been a special levy raised recently. What is that for? Why have they done that? So there's a lot more information to go through. I'm trying to summarize things, and I realize I've just got up to about 15 minutes already in this video, so it's on the longer side. But if you have any questions about this kind of stuff, it is good to talk to your conveyancer or solicitor. They can also do what's called an in-depth body corporate search, and that's usually costs anywhere between a couple $100, $200 to $400, usually about $300, and they can thoroughly check. They can give you a big report that has a lot more history of the complex, and it is hard to read and all that kind of stuff. If most people, first time they look at this, they think this is a lot of information. This is only about 20 pages or so. A body corporate actual in-depth search is like 50 pages or 100, could be a couple hundred pages. So that just has a lot of all the in-depth information about any kind of issues, things that could be brought up in the future meeting and all that kind of stuff. But most of the time, depending on the complex, I'll just get the disclosure statement. Most of the time, I won't particularly worry about the full in-depth body corporate search. Depending on the age of the complex, what kind of quality the complex is, after physically looking through a pest and building report as well, then I'll kind of make that judgment. So I hope this video helps. There's a lot of information. Feel free to get in contact with us if you do have any more questions about anything. And thanks so much for the question, guys. Keep them coming, and I'll talk to you soon and see you in the next video. Bye.